Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guest, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us this evening. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the tether lines that have us all bound up in this life. What are they made of? Where are they coming from? How are they sourced? How do we fuel them? And boy, when we start to put them around with duct tape and we say it is our identity, it is the way we are going, it's what I was supposed to do, and it is going to take me out until the end. What we're talking about today are addictions. We're also talking about those likes, those wants, the feeling of this is me, this is what I was meant to do, or oh, this is the only thing that's going to save me, fix me, or keep me on in this life. What is holding you back? What is holding you together? What is holding you in this space and time? Is it alcohol? Is it drugs? Sexual addiction? Perhaps even relationship addiction? The idea of financial, of success, climbing that ladder, perhaps even education. Hey, we all know people that have got 5 and 6 degrees and they keep going. But also, too, we know people that have been drinking or alcohol and have tried so many ways to be able to squelch their fears, their pains, or to try to fit in. What is the heart, the mind, the body, and the soul speaking, and we cannot even hear it? Maybe we just don't want to hear it. Or maybe those words, they just kind of sound like nails on a chalkboard to us. Well, today my guest, TJ Woodward, his book is Conscious Recovery, a fresh perspective on addiction, and that's exactly what we will be talking about. TJ, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Jeanette. I'm so delighted to be in this conversation with you.
I'm so glad to have you. You know, I think the idea when we see the word addiction, immediately people throw up this front and they say, oh, I got it. Oh, I know what it is. I know what it's all about. Been there before, done that. And there are so much, there's so much judgment. There's so much shame and guilt around the words, don't you think?
Yeah, and there's so many words that keep us stuck, right? And addiction is one of those words that, you know, in the old paradigm, if you will, you either needed to admit you had an addiction and that was the primary problem in your life and you needed to address it, or it's easy to deny that. Oh, I don't have that. And so I know you and I are really curious about choosing different words that don't keep us stuck. But if you do use the word addiction, I would say on some level, all of us might be addicted to something because I use a very simple definition. Trying to manage something that feels damaged or broken within with something outside of ourselves. And in that way, we can see our culture is riddled with that.
But it also, too, is a quest of mastery in which we want to master, to feel like we have accomplished the power over something. Do you know what I mean? So it's sort of like addiction is on the left because it's broken or whatever. And on the right, we want to feel we have the power. We've now taken it over. You know, that paradigm all the way to the left or all the way to the right, both of those are addictions, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And addiction is usually managing something. And as you say, it's a quest for something. Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know in my early life, I felt so damaged and broken, and I was just searching. And what I know today is that was really a deep spiritual longing for wholeness, for connection, for love. And I was just trying to get that in some behavior or some other person. And I realized that all of that was actually my own divine purpose unfolding in a way that did work for a while, and then obviously quit working. And I had to look at a more internal process toward discovering my wholeness.
I think where we're at now is what I call the bridge. And what's happened is that, if you grew up in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, I grew up in the 50s, and we look back at it, oh, he's a drinker, he does that, whatever, and it just was, and there was no real quest to be able to find out more about yourself. And now we're at the point where we want to know more about ourselves. We want to know that we are so much more than just this human being and has all of these things that we go on and we do. But in essence, the experience that you and I have both grown up in, where we might have felt broken, we had violence or trauma, or we turned around and things happened to us, those collections of those stories is the bridge. We had to get from one paradigm to the other, so there had to be a mess in the middle. So we would be able to have something to say, oh, I see it now in retrospect, and look at it with different eyes. Because we couldn't just leap from one side to the other, perhaps.
Yeah, I think we are seeing that more and more in our culture because, as you have said, we are in the midst of a profound awakening on planet Earth. And if I think, I grew up in the 70s, and I looked at what happened in the 60s as kind of like this quantum leap in consciousness that the old way isn't really working. And in my own personal life, a lot of times that bridge, if you will, or the doorway, whatever metaphor we use, it can be filled with trauma. It can be filled with difficulty. I call it trouble at the border when you're shifting from one level of consciousness to another. And those things that are not in alignment with the new paradigm get burnt off. So we're seeing that collectively now. The narrative that we're hearing is, we're such a polarized and divided country and world, and I don't believe that. I believe we're all waking up in a profound way.
Right. Because I think a lot of times people will say, I had all of this go on in my early life, and that's what molded me and shaped me. But when you come to this awakening point, it's sort of like all of those stories come full front, and you say, holy heck, I'm cleaning out my closet because that is not the me, that is not my identity. Those are experiences that I have walked through, and now I can observe that which has passed on, and now go forth. It's almost like we're doing this constant ritual of shedding, don't you think?
Absolutely, and that really is something that is so important to me in my work, because most or many of the models, if you look at recovery and addiction or mental health, look at what's broken. What's broken about you and how do we fix you? And I come in and I ask this question like you are, and that is, what if underneath all of that, there's an essential self that's whole and perfect? And the journey is actually about returning to that. So we've had these experiences, and many of us believe we are our past. And my friend Dr. Sue Morter says life is a challenge and it's difficult until it isn't, right? And I carried around the stories and the beliefs and the ideas, and I was very unaware that that was what was creating reality until I woke up and realized, oh my gosh, I have a past, but I'm not my past. The truth of who I am has never been harmed, and it's unharmable. And that as a starting point, then we start to work with our past in a very, very different way.
What about the time when you say, I've had enough, whatever I'm doing is not working anymore? And when patients would come to me, I would say, awesome, I'm so glad you're here. They'd come and they'd say, I have cancer and blah, blah, blah. And I'd say, oh, awesome, I'm so glad you're here. And they're like, what? And I'm saying, yes, because whatever you had in your life has brought you to this point, and it has served you. And that's awesome. Because now you're saying, I'm going to open the door, I'm going to open the window. What can I try to be able to experience next? Isn't that the goal?
Yeah, and really, we create, we often hear in our culture things happen for a reason. And I actually want to offer a different point of view about that. I want to say we create the meaning from our experiences. So it's not, for example, cancer comes with this gift. It's that if I get a diagnosis like that, or if I've had an addiction, or if I'm going through a divorce, or someone I love dies, I can call that horrible, or I can say, I wonder what's wanting to emerge here. It doesn't mean that we bypass the emotions. And I think that's where we get a little bit nuanced, because A lot of times people will do a spiritual bypass. Oh, everything's great. There must be a gift in this. Let me look for it. Allow ourselves to feel the experience is actually what can help us transform, while also recognizing that what I call it actually holds a frequency that will create the next phase or stage of my development and my unfoldment.
Yeah, I think that's so vitally important because there's so many people out there that will say, well, take this drug and you'll be better, and they forget about all of the stuff in between. Or do this spiritual thing and you'll be ascended and you'll be a light person and you'll never have those experiences again. Or just get rid of all of those things in your life that no longer work, but yet there is the body, the mind, the spirit, the soul, the emotions, the feelings. There are all of these, as you say, rooms to kind of be able to explore of yourself that really are talking to you at the same time. You just might be in one room and locked yourself down and can't hear it, but believe that's you're all good then, right?
Yeah, some years ago, many years ago, we were told we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yeah.
And I shot out of bed one morning and thought, what if we are spiritual beings having a spiritual experience? And that everything that we experience in the physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual actually is happening for our awakening. In other words, we don't need to reject parts of ourselves. And, when you were talking, I was reminding myself, or I was reminded of when I was in my early 20s, and I genuinely thought the goal of spirituality, spiritual practice, or recovery was to never have the human experience again, that there would be no death, there would be no sadness, there would be no breakups. And I realize now that all of that is an important part of our journey. And the moment I reject or label something as bad or wrong, then I suffer. When I embrace it and look at what is wanting to emerge and the transformational quality that is involved in whatever I'm experiencing, then I can begin to spiritualize all of life. Now, what does that mean? That simply means I have the ability to name it and to experience it based on my level of conscious awareness. So if I'm saying, isn't it horrible what's happening? And if we watch the news, we get fed that constantly. Isn't it horrible what's happening with my brother, my sister, my partner? And what if we were to shift that to, I wonder what the opportunity is here. I wonder what my soul's yearning is here. How can I be the frequency of love in the midst of this? So many questions we can ask.
Yeah, I think also, too, it attaches a lot of tether lines, so to speak, because many people have said, well, I grew up with, and then they have a story, and then it has a judgment, a shame, a guilt, as I always call it, the badges on your wetsuit. When you have those, they believe it's their identity. But also, too, it's not only their identity, it's also their tribe. It's the people around them, their family, their job, what they believe in life, their beliefs and their truths. So really what happens when you get to that point, of that awakened journey for the next, as we say, petal on the flower, it's truly you go, well, oh my gosh, all of this is going to start falling away. Now what? And what will happen to me? I know for myself, it was a lot of, well, I think I'm just going to let all those tether lines go, all of those chains, so to speak, that bind me. And literally, for about 2 years, I will tell you, my lower legs felt like I was dragging chains like nobody's business. And so one day I sat down and said, I no longer choose to be chained to whatever beliefs or experience is going on in my life. And eventually, whatever it was started to be able to dissipate because I chose not to carry the chains. Don't you think that perhaps those are words, too, that many people will express through the process of coming through an addiction or coming through a new expanding process in their life?
Well, yes, absolutely. And as you were speaking, I was reminded of my first teacher and mentor, Mary Ellen. It was recently her 100th birthday. She's no longer in her physical form that she once was. And she invited me every night before I went to sleep to imagine the tethers between me and every relationship I had, like the cord that connected me in the past, in the present, even in the future, and then to gently cut those and allow those people and situations to float away so that I could go to sleep knowing that I am deeply connected with the truth of who I am, which is beyond all these tethers. I facilitated a workshop some years ago, and I invited people. We had a backpack filled with heavy rocks, and they were invited to put it on their back and tell some of the traumatic stories of their life and feel the weight of the story represented by the backpack. And then at the end of the story, they had a choice. They could keep wearing the backpack, they could put it down and simply notice what happens. We get so caught up in the human mind says, yeah, but it can't be that easy. I can't just let this story go. This has been, trauma for generations and cultural trauma and all the layers. And yet at some point, we recognize that we can actually choose to put the story down. It doesn't mean it didn't happen, although I have, been a little controversial and said we can change the past. The reason I say that is the only past that really is alive is the past in our minds and the stories we keep telling.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think also, too, it's because there's some sort of investment in those other relationships. It's sort of like we would say with a family, if we let it go, we'd say, oh, but it's my mother or my father or my brother or my sister. And you mean I won't have a mother, father, brother, sister anymore? And in essence, I think once you get to that point, I went through it, and what I did is I thanked every single thing. If it was dirty water to an abusive relationship, to maybe alcohol, or it might have been to broken downness of the human body or whatever, I said, thank you. It was so awesome to have you with me, alongside of me on this journey. Because everything has a purpose in some way. But the idea is we want to take an eraser and say, get it out of my history, get it out of my knowing or out of my story. But then what happens is when you can erase it, then you end up with this vacant space. Now, you definitely can create a new story from that, but sometimes I think people say it that I don't ever want to see it ever again kind of idea, And, well, we all know pain shows up in different ways, different times, different places, different reasons. So if we thank that experience from whatever it was, we begin to have gratitude for the present, and then we can have something to start from, perhaps.
Yeah, that, at some point I started looking at some of the language I was using, and I remember hearing myself saying, letting go of the story. And I realized that really it's about living beyond the story. It's not about rejecting it. It's not about pretending it didn't happen. It really is more about how we frame it. And what I love about what you said, or at least what I heard, is that we can actually have gratitude in the midst of it. So how many times have we looked back at a situation, maybe we called it horrible at the time, and then we can say now, wow, that was the most amazing, life-changing experience of my life. And so can I be in that now? And then we don't have to reject the story. We don't have to pretend like it didn't happen. We can actually embrace it as part of our journey. And that integration then creates a very different relationship with what we call reality, which you and I know we're creating based on the lens that we're looking at life through.
Yeah, I think it's about saying, there's all these filters that we look through. It's just how thick would we like it to be, and can we just use it as perhaps a cape on our back instead of being that what we are going forward, I always say to people, even if, that old thing, it was several years ago, it was, they had it in, psychologists were saying, well, if you have, 2 or 3 marriages, there's not something wrong with them, there's something wrong with you. And I'm going, well, holy heck, stop, no way. Every single relationship was absolutely awesome. It brought something to you, you experienced something, and you moved on. You may have kept something or let it all go, whatever it is. I think the idea is that was an absolute moment where psychologists and stuff are really tagging a whole lot of shame and guilt on people, don't you think?
100%, because really every experience we have, if used properly, can be part of our own evolution, right? And so the mind, whether we realize it or not, we're swimming in the consciousness of good and bad and right and wrong and competition. And yet every relationship, relationships do come and go. I know a topic you're passionate about is the ultimate surrender in this life is when we release our body, right? When we when we die. And we wouldn't say, wow, that life really just didn't work because you ended up dying, right? But we often frame that with relationships. Well, why did that relationship end? What was wrong with you? What was wrong with them? We talk about toxic relationships. And so you and I are saying, let's have a very different point of view about that. Every relationship was perfect. When I showed up for the relationship and the moment I left, all of that was part of the journey.
I'll never forget, after my first divorce, my relatives had said to me, Jeanette, what was wrong with you? There must be something wrong with you because he was such a nice guy. And, I can distinctly remember them saying that, and it kind of like cycled through my memory for maybe about 6 months. But after that, I was like, what the heck? There's something wrong with you, and I just kind of let it go. and I think that we have to sometimes pay attention when those things are said, felt, or heard, because they're there to be able to say, hey, I see you, I feel you, I hear you. But then it's about the attachment of, in other words, putting it in your secrets box or storing it up in your purse for a rainy day, or holding it onto and saying, that's the cap that I wear every day when we wake up. That's really what we're talking about breaking the cycle of addiction, when you talk about in your book, Conscious Recovery, is what can we spill out on the table and see how to open it up. TJ, it's so interesting. I had spoken with some elder women at one time, and I said, we all need to get together and, we'll have one person stand up and they'll share an experience that they've been holding on to because, elders, when they get towards, that last quarter of life, they're like, am I going to take it with me or should I spill it? So I said, let's do the spilling today. So one woman would say her experience that she's been holding on to, and she starts to cry, and she thinks it's all part of her, and she's afraid, and all of this other stuff. And I said, another woman, it's sort of like, when you play poker and you throw money in the middle, I would say, another woman would be throwing her handkerchief in the middle, and she'd say, hey, honey, I got one better than that. Let me tell you my story. And the next person would say, oh, no, I got one better than that. Let me tell you mine. And by the time they got done, all of these women had shed all of that stuff they'd been carrying for so long and just felt like, we're a little bit free, or maybe we are just great old women who made it through life. Isn't that what we're asking ourselves? Are we great souls who can make it through life?
Yeah, and really that journey, the authenticity and the vulnerability and the sharing of the story is so powerful, because as we share that story and we create a deeper connection with one another. The key that is so interesting is often in the not telling the story, we're actually keeping it alive. And sometimes all we need to do is share that story and notice what happens. Notice not only do we feel more connected with the people around us, but we realize when we verbalize the story that it can actually not have the power over us that it once did. And so in Conscious Recovery, we look at addiction as a brilliant strategy, right? And a strategy to manage the story. So if I believe I am my story and I've decided that I'm fundamentally broken, I have shame, which is a belief that I am wrong and I'm carrying a core false belief, I'm going to experience that everywhere and look for relief. And that seeking that relief can be called an addiction. Then we think that's the problem. Once we get rid of that, then we're going to be fine. But the truth is we really need to look more deeply within. And the ultimate reality is that we're a whole and perfect being. As we start to release those stories, we start to not change the narrative, but live beyond it and realize, oh my gosh, I've been carrying around this story about my family, about myself, about money, about sex, about everything in life, and that has created that reality. In other words, when we begin to heal from the inside out, we start to have a very different projector, and it seems like our relationships just magically start to heal.
Yeah, with that woman that I had said, about carrying the bills into her next lifetime, she was able to pass through the door. And she says, well, what would I do? She says, I'm sitting here and my partner's coming up to me and talking to me about bills, and it's like she's almost ready to move through that door. And I said to her, just cross your hands, and with your top forefinger, just flick it off like there's a bug on your hand. Every single time she starts to just flick it off. It's not it's not coming into you. It's not part of you. It is not the truth. And she did that for a while, and she said, my goodness, she didn't bother me once today. What happened? So I think sometimes the idea is it that simple? Not always. Is it that hard? Not always. Can we talk for a second, TJ, about, and this is by no means a diss on the process of like AA meetings or anything, but let's just talk about that for a second. When you have a sharing of your stories and you're in perhaps maybe a circle or a group, whatever it might be, and you feel the energy when you walk in that room, it's always very low. It's very dense. It's very heavy. And I think sometimes the idea is you keep going into the pot of soot. You're always going to get soot on your shoes when you're walking out. And what you and I are proposing is perhaps maybe we as the observers, we are the light shining in the corner, and they're just saying, oh, that looks really interesting. Let me go over there and find out more. Versus always going into the soot and walking out with it. Perhaps?
Yeah, and that really is the journey. Many recovery modalities, support groups focus so heavily on the addiction, on the problem, on the story. And I think it's important for people, it must be important because it exists, for people to have that acknowledgement. But it seems like that's for someone really early in their journey. And then as we start to wake up, we start to realize that my repetitively telling the same story, like I remember hearing someone once say, I'm 25 years sober, but I'm an alcoholic, so I don't know how to have relationships. And so he had, not only did he label himself the alcoholic, but he also then added to that means I don't know how to have relationships. And of course, he didn't know how to have relationships. He kept affirming it. He kept talking about all the, in his mind, failed relationships, instead of, I'm so much more than my story. And so I think it must be important in some way for people to have a place to come and share those, but not in a way of owning that as our identity, but realizing that we can actually release those stories, live beyond those stories, realize they no longer have power over us, and the truth of who we are is that light. And when we shift from the law of attraction to the law of radiance, everything changes because we are standing in a greater reality that the truth of who we are is light, and we're radiating that everywhere we go.
I can distinctly remember several instances in my life, way too many to count, but I can distinctly remember one. I was probably about 10 or 12 years old, and there was a lot of violence in my home. And I can see myself standing in the corner just radiating light and watching this. And I didn't engage in it. I didn't step into it or anything. And then it just stopped. And I thought for a second, okay, they can see the light, but they had no choice but to be able to retreat because they wanted to stay in that space. And then I think after that I was kind of, is my light not being effective? Because I pretty much came into this world where I didn't step into the human experience. I still don't. I never did, fully. I pretty much remained in the spiritual kind of spirit force. So I keep doing that all the time, and there'd be times in my life where, like, when I would go in to adjust a patient, for, in medical school or whatever, and I would just walk into the room, not even touch the person. You could hear their bones crack, and they'd look up and smile. I said, the power of the light is still there, So I think sometimes these people that are stuck in that soot, so to speak, in those stories, need to be able to have a sense of, can you remember any time in your life in which you were standing like the light, Or can you remember any time in your life where you have felt that your light was received by another and the other person recognized it? Yes. What I'm talking about is that true spirit, soul, human connection. And that's pretty much where your book takes us. When you get to that recognition of that, I think that's when you say, oh, okay, now I can breathe. Your soul opens, your spirit opens, everything falls away. It is that awesome moment. Perhaps?
Yes, beautifully said, because that's ultimately what we're here to do, and more specifically, who we've come here to be that light. And imagine for a moment the world as we unplug from the conditions of the world and plug into our true nature and radiate that. That's what changed me so dramatically. You know, I talk about Mary Helen a lot. She was the person that was standing in her light, and I felt it in such a powerful way. She started to see that light in me before I even knew it was there. Of course, on some level, I knew it was there, but I had forgotten that light. I had believed I was broken and damaged, and her presence shifted me. And so my work now in the mental health field, I train clinicians on the conscious recovery model, and the model is not in the mind, the model is in the being. Let me hold for my clients the innate ability for them not only to heal, but to know their own wholeness. And that presence, that holding space for that actually has so much more power than let me diagnose and treat you, which is the way the medical model works. I'm not saying that doesn't have a place. What I am saying is, and what you're saying so beautifully is, when I'm standing in my light, it has such a profound effect on the people I'm sitting with.
Yes, and you know what I think also too, TJ, is the idea that we have all had these experiences in our life. And for some people to say, well, I've never felt that or known that, there will come a time when you will remember.
Yes.
And everyone will remember. You know, there's that old saying out there, well, you know, we want to let some cracks into your being so that the light of God can shine through. I'll say, heck no. I just want to crack open my wetsuit from the inside so my light, that is the source light, can shine out.
That's
so
right.
I think sometimes people forget. They think of it, something has to come to them. And the answer is no, it is already inside. It's already there. And some people will say, well, I need someone to come to light my light because it must be out. And I'm saying, heck no. And you know, and also, too, there's another song and story out there, well, we don't want to go into the darkness. I'll say, I love the darkness, because did you see all those little glitters there and everything? You know, it's absolutely beautiful. The glitter is your soul ball. So yes. I think the idea is that sometimes people will say, all of these things I somewhere in my frame of my mind or my soul have heard before, or I have sensed before, I just don't know how to let them grow. And what you and I are talking about is the process, how to help nurture them to grow. Yes?
Yes. Yeah, and, you know, if you take a seed and put it out in the sunshine, it's not going to grow. You put it down into the soil, which is that darkness. And that darkness only exists in, the truth is that we're always shining. That light is always there.
Right.
And yes, as you said, you know, the idea that, you know, you say like a higher power, a person, a therapist, whatever it is, that can have an addictive quality to it, because we're really saying, I'm not the light, and we need someone to bring it to us. And as a beautiful song lyric from my friend Amitabh says, we can call off the search and rest in the truth it's always been. That light is who and what we are, and it's been obscured by the stories and the ideas and the beliefs we put on top of it. And as we excavate, we don't need to find the light. We don't need to search for it. It's who and what we are. And when we discover that, we can have that instantaneous shift, that quantum moment where we realize, oh, this is reality. Not all the stuff I've been taught about scarcity and fear and competition. And, you know, earlier you referenced having a tribe. And, you know, we hear people use the term like-minded. I want to find like-minded people. And that's really just meaning I want to surround myself with people who agree with me. Imagine the seeming division in the world, as we all know our own light. Oh, wow. You mean you and I are the same? We have different points of view, but ultimately we're the same. That's where a profound shift can happen, and it is happening.
But also, too, I think that people want to be able to say, I need likes, I need people to be in alignment with me. And I'll say, oh, no, my gosh, honey, sorry. Maybe I said that wrong, honey. What you're really talking about is ghost jumping. Am I going to take my energy and supersede it upon another person? And the answer is that we're really, truly all a tapestry, and we're all creating those little threads. We all come together. But if you always remember a tapestry, just like I have hanging over my window in my bedroom, is that on the bottom, all of the threads continue to unfold and unravel. And then you have another string to be able to make another tapestry. So I think if we can come to the idea, even with tribes and stuff, is saying that a tribe is that one person can cook, one person can clean, one person can sew, one person can do something else. That's all the tapestry of that what we weave, versus saying that we all are spiritual, we all are humans, we all are this, we all are that. And we all have different aspects. So sometimes when people are saying that, well, I'm still deep in this addiction, I'll say, awesome, that's where you're supposed to be today. Another will say, I'm recovered. I'll say, that's where you're supposed to be today. Because it's a tapestry. Again, it isn't like we're not supposed to go out and drag everybody along with us and be the gurus. Come follow me. Here's my template. Do it this way. What we're saying is that it's in gratitude for everyone for where they are today. And that gratitude is what builds the light inside of you, versus let's come on because you have to do it this way. Maybe?
Beautiful. Beautifully said. I can't even add anything to that. It was so beautifully said.
Well, TJ, I think it's just my experience. It's been my time. And like I said, I have never ever in this lifetime bought the idea of the concept of the human story. I just came in that way. I kind of look at people and I'm going, I kind of don't get it. You know what I mean? And even like I had one of my husbands had said to me, he says, one day you're going to have to step into reality because that's where living is. And I'll say, no thanks, honey. I'm quite fine where I am. My existence is awesome.
That's right. We don't need to buy into the collective reality of the fear and the scarcity that we already talked about, because those of us who are light workers or light beings, which by the way is everyone, some of us, I had a client once ask me, do you really walk around every single moment knowing that you're love and light, knowing that everything is perfect and that every person is on their perfect journey? And I said, yes, I do, but sometimes I forget. I forget that, and I start to get hooked by collective reality, and then wait, that's not true. I love the analogy of flicking it with the fingers, like, oh yeah, I forgot. That's not who I am. That's a story that was given to me, but it's not who I am. I'm not my name. I'm not my body. I'm so much more.
But I think also too, and further, say about gratitude. If you kind of say, oh, well, today I'm going to feel really much pain. I'm going to feel terrible today because this is what's going on today. I'll say, awesome. Can you let me know, how that feels and everything? And you can have pain. You can have physical pain, emotional pain. You could be, oh, gosh, where did that story? I thought I was done with it. It's back here again. And I'll say, it's never the same. It is similar. If we can truly remember that, people will say and give themselves a better break, because they think that, oh, well, the same old thing is back again. I mustn't have fixed it or done it right. And I'll say, you did for that time. This is similar. It is never the same. So, I mean, this is likening back to all my quantum physics classes. The idea is that energy is never the same, and never, ever, 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 ever. So the word same has to go out the door. And we used to, use the word, it may appear as similar. Do you think also, too, with addictions that sometimes people will say, I kind of saw the light, I kind of felt it, I felt better, I was feeling okay. And then all of a sudden it disappeared, and the same things came back. And it's when we want to say, screech your fingers on the chalkboard, it's not the same. It may appear as similar, but the appearance is in your mind.
Yes, and that really is what Buddha taught us 2,500 years ago, that the difference between pain and suffering, right? Pain is inevitable, and there might be a time in human consciousness where that's not true, but in this time and space, we have pain in our body, maybe relationships, emotional pain, but when we start to believe things like, oh, this shouldn't be happening to me, I thought I was finished with this. For every time someone said, but I'm 40 years old, and am I still dealing with this, right? And so that is suffering because we go into a story. One thing that I like to invite people to look at is, what would I be experiencing without the story? Because, when we come into the world, like a little toddler, a pre-programmed human, they absolutely feel what's present. They let us know exactly what they're feeling, and then they go back to their natural state, which is joy. Most of us then get taught, that you shouldn't feel that, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't act like that. Good kids do this, boys do this, girls do this, all those layers. And so suffering is, this shouldn't be happening. If we were to pause, or when we pause, and say, let me actually feel this and have the experience, it actually moves through us.
It's so funny you said about pain and suffering because, I share my stories very much on the radio with other people, and they say, oh my gosh, and there was a spiritual time where people were saying, well, you mustn't be done with your story if you're still repeating it. And I'll say, go away. I'm sharing my story because I have a sense that it may trigger something in you, or maybe it's something that you need to hear at this time, and let it go at that. But they said, well, you must be still suffering, honey. Do you know I took out my iPhone and I had to say, define suffering, because I don't know what suffering is. I never did know what a word meant. I've never used it in my vocabulary. And I'm going, that's really strange, and I kind of just let that go to the wayside too. Mm-hmm. But I think the idea is that when you get to a certain point, your stories are very important. They do have weight and they do have value, just as you and I have shared today, our stories of our life, our experiences and things that are out there, because others tend to say, oh, I didn't know that. Do you mean that other people have had that similar experience? Are you meaning that was maybe perhaps something that was going on at the time in history? Are you meaning that, maybe the people in that decade didn't know better, so I can let that one go instead of carrying it as shame? Because if we look back in history, when I grew up in the 50s, it was rare to have anyone get up to the 8th grade. Almost all of the people have lost most of their teeth. Antibiotics had just come onto the forefront, and everybody was, always drinking all the time because that's what it was. And it was post-war time, so people were still fighting with each other because they didn't know anything better. Mm-hmm. Now, why in the year 2023 do we want to go back and judge the people that lived then? Because that was where the collective was then. That's right. And it shows us the evolution of consciousness. As you were talking, I was reminding myself that, when you were talking about it might appear to be the same, but it really is just us having an experience that is similar, but from a different level of consciousness. Yeah. And so that happens collectively and it happens individually. The issues that repeat themselves, we look at them from a different point of view or a different lens. And as we evolve, we might have something that feels similar to the story, but we're seeing it in a really different way. And I agree. If we go back in history and look at what was happening, we can understand collective consciousness and the human ego. If you turn on CNN and Fox News, you're going to hear two totally different stories about the same thing. Neither one is more right or wrong, and I could get in trouble for saying that. But the truth is, it's simply a demonstration of the human ego that we keep talking about these stories over and over again. And what we're saying is, let's shift beyond that. We don't need to reject what's happening. We can look at it from a different point of view. And because of that, we can start to shift. That's the greatest paradox. Once we know who and what we are, we actually do start to shift reality. Well, in closing, TJ, I think the idea is how do we navigate our days today? And I share that all the time on my social media pages. You shared it in your book and a lot of your work. And I think the idea is that we see what is showing up today and we say, awesome. I always use that word. I mean, like, that is my big thing. It's awesome. It used to be cool, dude, but now it's awesome, because the idea is that I see, I feel, I sense. I can almost, I'm a medium also, and all of my gifts are all wide open. So I can feel your pain. I know it. I can sense it. I can taste it. It's all there, and it's all fruition. And I'll say, oh, awesome. It's a human being that's real. It's a human spirit that's going through something. It's a soul that says, whoa, isn't this something else? So everything is on full tilt. The idea is then you say, I get it all, and then it's what you do with it next. Do you shut it down with drugs or alcohol? Do you shut it down with your words? Do you shut it down to fit into alignment? Or do you say, awesome socks, what's next? And you be able to say, I think I'm going to go outside. I think I'm going to go have something to eat. I think I'm going to say, you know what, that was awesome, but I'm done with that. And then have another thought. It's the next breath in everything that we experience in life that is the most important choice. Breathe freely for 1 second and then say, what's next? Put your hand on your heart and say, what's next? And start to listen. That's what you and I are proposing. Take your hand on your heart and breathe and ask yourself, what's next? And make a conscious choice. That's how we have conscious navigating living, don't you think?
Absolutely. And I love the word awesome because it's pointing to living a life filled with awe, a life filled with curiosity and wonder. It's the judgments that keep us stuck. And so I love what you're inviting people to do. Pause, put your hand on your heart, take a deep breath, remember who and what you are that's beyond any condition in the world. Be in awe. Look at what is awesome about this. Curiosity allows us to open and expand where judgment keeps us stuck. So pause and say, I wonder what the infinite possibilities of the next moment bring. Who have I come here to be? What else is possible? These questions can open us up to living a life filled with much more awe, which then we can say, awesome.
Absolutely, because you know why, TJ? Then you step into your unique self, and it's come to remind yourself that everyone is unique. Instead of thinking what social media is that we're all alike. We are not all alike, in our expression. We are alike and similar in our energy source, but we are not alike in our expression. So we can all say that there's so much more out there. How would you like to express your uniqueness, your gifts, your just awesomeness, how you can help others or show others or do something? And that's the goal, I think, that we're really seeking.
Yes, I love that. Dr. Jeanette, you are amazing. I've loved this conversation. I feel like I have a new kindred spirit and a friend. I'm so grateful.
Oh, I'm so thankful to have you, and thank you so much for your kind words, TJ, because I think that sometimes our decades on this world, and maybe even if it be short or long, we all have something to contribute. So what I really encourage others is share your stories, share your thoughts, and say, is there a possibility of something different? And that's what we want you to explore. So, TJ, I thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Could you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work? That would be wonderful.
Yes, tjwoodward.com. You can discover my books, my courses. All of it comes back to one simple truth, and that is you're a whole and perfect spiritual being. So that you can find me at tjwoodward.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, TJ. This was such a pleasure. I think I hope you come back again to Dance in the Ethers with us, because that's where we all are already, right?
Yes, I would love that.
Thank you. If you'd like to find out more information about TJ Woodward, again, the book is Conscious Recovery, A Fresh Perspective on Addiction. Please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page and to go directly to his website for more information. And definitely check it out. You can purchase the book and you say, oh, but I don't really have any issues. Yeah, we all don't. Yeah, we get it. But, maybe we would just like to read and be able to say, I may find myself on this page, perhaps on that page, and maybe I can share this book with another. Perhaps I could read the book, and maybe I could just set it down in a coffee shop, and someone else could pick it up. Perhaps you can be the extender of gifting this gift to humanity. Wouldn't it be awesome to purchase a few of the books and just leave them around in random places? Maybe drop it on the floor in a grocery store. Perhaps maybe leave it at a bookstore and say, this is a gift, on the counter, and see who picks it up. Maybe then we are shining our light and we are letting others be able to be in service to further shine their light. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher. Until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit dr.jeanette-gallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.